Tafshin Memvav, 1986. Shlach Anashim Goimer, stand for you men, etc. Doing Jewish Rabbi saying it's known the Mamorim of Arabay. You see him, Belchud Torah B'Tchil Satzke Chassidusha Parsha, brought down to the Torah at the beginning of the Chassidusha Parshas of the week, as we know the custom that I've been called that way. Al Derech about the Rishon Shalach is similar to this in the Mamorim following the Torah. In other words, other Abayim, the Inyan, Parshas HaMeraglim concerning the story of the Meraglim Adul, Rotza Meraglim Konoslav. It's widen the Meraglim want to enter Eretz Yisrael. So this is a classic thing that the Rebbe always speaks about, but here the Rebbe really fleshes out the whole background about the Meraglim, the Eden's experience in the desert, and based on that strengthens the question and answers the question powerfully. The L'chur of Davar Peller seemingly it's a wonder. Shari Amr Zal Chazal said, Shlach l'cha daitcha, you should send. Why does it say Shlach l'cha? We should have said just Shlach. Why is it l'cha l'daitcha? This is according to your view. This is on Moshe Rabbeinu's choice. The idea of sending the Meraglim was Moshe Rabbeinu's idea via Kulam Anashim, and they were all called Anashim, and we know the word Anashim means, like Rashi says, an expression of importance and value. And at that time, when Moshe Rabbeinu sent them, they were actually righteous and good. And not just they were righteous and good, they were men, they were leaders of the congregation, they were men of renown. So we're not talking about just some people on the on the sidelines. We're talking about very important people, people that were of a high caliber. How did they make a mistake in this matter and didn't want to enter Eretz Yisrael? And even more so, the matter would be a wonder. The Meraglim were actually chosen by Moshe, like we said before, according to the view of Moshe. So therefore, if Moshe Rabbeinu was one that did the choosing, Moshe Rabbeinu was one that made the decision over here. Surely Moshe Rabbeinu recognized them individually and specifically, because that was Moshe Rabbeinu's general attitude. Like we see a Medrash, how specific and exact Moshe Rabbeinu was with the sheep. Surely he was very specific when he knew who he was dealing with in Klal Yisrael. Moshe was a faithful shepherd. Good Isa Medrash al Pasuk of Moshe, like it's brought down the Medrash al Pasuk, and Moshe was a shepherd. What's the idea of his being a true shepherd? It says, first he brings out the young sheep, the ones that haven't yet developed yet their teeth and gums, so they should be able to go out to graze with the soft grass that's easy to chew. And afterwards, he takes out the old sheep that are over there. Their teeth are already weaker, etc. So they could eat and they could graze by the middle strength or hardness of the grass. And then afterwards, he took out the young, strong sheep. They should eat the hard grass. So this is how specific and how conscious Moshe was of the particular sheep that he was grazing. Hashem said, someone that knows how to take out sheep to graze. Every type of sheep according to their capability, he should come and be the shepherd for my nation. So therefore, movement so to its understood concerning Moshe Rabbeinu, he recognizes the characteristic of his sheep, the Yidden, like a shepherd examines his flock. So therefore, he wasn't oblivious to what took place with the Yidden, and he wasn't oblivious to what type of people he sent. When he sent and when he chose important people, he knew who he was choosing. Therefore, it's even a greater wonder, how could the Meraglim make such a big toss if Moshe Rabbeinu had full confidence in them and knew who they were? Another thing we need to understand in the time, the complaint of the Meraglim was that the nation is so powerful that settled in the land. And they said additionally, that he's more powerful than him. What does it mean, more powerful than him? They should have said they're more powerful than us. Who's the him that they are referring to? Chazal said, it's as if they were saying it towards Hashem, that the Meraglim were saying that the nations that were inhabiting Eretz Yisrael were more powerful than the Eibishter, and therefore we couldn't conquer it because Hashem wouldn't be able to overcome them. And this is not just that you need to have a medrash and a maimer chazal for this, but just the simple reading of the story leads us that they felt this way. And this is also obvious in the simple reading of the text. If we do not consider the fact that they thought that the nations were more powerful than Hashem, so what's the big deal? What's going on over here? They're more powerful than us. That's what it comes to tell us, that 31 nations in Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Canaan, are greater than us. Obviously they're greater than us. And so what? Who cares? But mind the call of Yeshua. Another question is that the response of Kol of Yeshua with this, that that the land is very, very good. If Hashem desires us, but do not rebel against Hashem. The response does not fit what they said. The loy on the klum al tanosam efes kiaza am because that Kalev did not respond whatsoever on their complaint when they said that the nation is very strong and he's stronger than us or stronger than Hashem. The only thing that Kalev said, Hashem desires us, and the land is very, very good. What does that answer? The question that they posed, the problem that they raised. Especially social, but they were important people. Again, they weren't like some like side show over here. It wasn't like the Erev Rav, for example. These were important people, so therefore you had to respond to what they were saying. From this, it's even more obvious that there's room for their complaint that has validity, because they're not just going to just throw out stuff that makes no sense. What's the content of the response of Kalev and Yeshua? Then similarly, we need to understand the Rebbe is going to expand this to the entire generation that lived in the wilderness, that fell for their complaint. That really, it makes no sense. How could they have fallen for this? Similar to the above concerning the spies, closed there at Midbar, we need to understand concerning the general and the whole generation of the Midbar that fell for their complaints. How is it possible that all the men of the generation of the Midbar that are a knowledgeable generation, they were present when the Torah was given? By them, literally, it was fulfilled where it says that our eyes saw, and not someone else's, not a foreigner's eyes, and our ears heard, and not someone else's. In other words, they themselves witnessed Hashem speaking to them. So therefore, they were aware of Hashem in the most powerful way possible. Especially then, the world was existing immediately after the revelation of the giving of the Torah. So since it was immediately after the revelation of the Torah, when the world is then still under the impact of that event, because of this revelation, the world was, my screen's getting stuck over here. Top of the next page, it was on a much higher level. So how could the general generation of that time make such a mistake? And to such a degree did they make a mistake that they were punished not to enter Eretz Yisrael? So maybe you're going to say it was a minority of people. It wasn't a majority. Even if you want to tell me that you're going to find a minority, you're always going to find a bunch of people are malcontents or just have complaints or do not pay attention to the facts. And so therefore, it's not such a big wonder. But you can't say that this was a case of the minority. The Torah speaks on the majority of Achiram Lahatos, and we follow the majority of the majority weighs down the scales, and he causes that himself and the entire world should be judged for the side of merit, and he causes for himself and for the entire generation a salvation. So if the majority would have not been accepting of the Meraglim's kindness, so then the whole punishment wouldn't have taken place. Therefore, we must say that this was a mistake of the majority. Zel Pelagod will be also just a great wonder. How's it possible that the majority of Yidden made such a mistake and didn't want to enter Eretz Yisrael? And here again, he's going to compound the question even more. Even more so, since we know that the clouds of glory that was in the generation of Midbar destroyed all the snakes and scorpions and poisonous snakes that were in the wilderness. They destroyed them physically. And how much more so they destroyed all these negative forces spiritual. In this battle called in surely every negative thing, meaning any type of negativity in the world around them, they were not surrounded by any type of negativity, both physical and spiritual. Therefore, again, they were in such a holy place. How could they make such a mistake? Even more so, it's not understood. It's known, it's explained in Svarim and brought down the reason for the prohibition to eat animals that kill. Why not? Because the characteristics of the thing that's being eaten pass through and pass over to the person that consumes it. So that's why we don't want to eat animals that kill, because then that killing nature will become part of us. So the Rebbe, as he always says, if something is to be found in the negative, how much more so in the positive? If by eating bad food, you're worried about the bad influences, how much more so the good food should have good influences? And what did they eat in the Midbar? They had unbelievably good food, spiritual food. For this understood, the Mekibim should be Yosem Midbar Achla Anshidor Midbar Lechem Neshamayim. Since when they were in the wilderness, the people of the wilderness ate bread from heaven. That's the most purest form of food to such a degree there was no waste product from it. Which also Miriam, they drank water from Miriam's well. Again, it was miraculous water, so obviously it was very holy and very spiritual. How they move in Shachilas, it's understood that eating and drinking such elevated things. These elevated things became then transformed into their blood and flesh, like their own flesh. So obviously, the man and the water, it brought down into them and caused them to be elevated and refined. And not just what they ate, but the garments also caused refinement to them because of what occurred with the garment. So it's also concerning their garments that they wore in the midbar. Like it's explained in Chassidus concerning negative garments. For example, what's a negative garment? Wearing clothes from Shabbos. These are the levels of klippa that are makif. And makif, as we know, is always higher and more powerful than panimi. So to a certain degree, wearing unkosher clothing impacts the person worse. It's a more difficult klippa than a klippa that's a panimi klippa. Similar to this, also understood concerning a home, and that's called a distant makif. How much more powerful the impact of the home has on the person, even more than the pnimi. Similar to how the garments are called a close makif. So if the makif is so much more powerful than the pnimi, to such a degree that a negative makif is a lot worse than a negative pnimi. So again, Let's now take it in the good side. If a person has positive makifim, how much more should it impact it? Zem movement again. Keeping this understood concerning the opposite side. Kishab God and makbakar bayis makbaroch eminyonik dusha when the garments, which is a close market, and the home, which is a distant market, are from matters of holiness. So it affects and influences an elevation on one who is enclosed with this garment and one that's living in the home. So therefore, the Yidden that were in the Midbar should have been impacted by this. So too was in the generation of the wilderness. In addition to the fact that their food and drink was from bread from heaven and from the wellspring of Miriam. Also, their garments was very high. How do we see that they were very elevated garments? That your clothing did not fall apart. That the clouds of glory was like a laundromat, was like cleaners. It would clean them, it would press them. And even their young children, that when they would grow, their garments grew with them. And the Rebbe adds a very interesting idea from the Medrash, even when they were born, their garments were born with them. Like this garment of a certain animal, that the shell or the garment grows with him. Also, either a certain type of grasshopper, or turtle, or something that the shell grows with him. So therefore, all these garments were also miraculous. The Mizem of Vanes, Miles Alavushim, from this understood the great quality of the garments that the Yidden had when they were in the wilderness. Just like it's an idea of their garments that were miraculous and holy and elevating. So too, it's an idea of a home. Like it says, that I settled the Bnei Yisrael in booths. So the Chazal explained what are these sukkahs that Hashem put the Yidden in. Anania covered Hayu. These were the clouds of glory. We said before, there's Makif Akarav and Makif Arachik, the distant Makif and the closer Makif. What was their distant Makif? In other words, the ultimate Makif, the highest level that they had was Hayanania Akarav, was the clouds of glory. So based on all of these things, it makes it so much more difficult to understand where the Meraglim were coming from. They were so imbued with holiness. The Meraglim were so imbued with holiness. The generation that was with the Meraglim were so imbued in holiness. And we're saying that the Torah that goes on the majority of these people messed up. Well, if he calls that if so, the wonder is even greater. Why didn't the members of the Torah Midbar want to enter Eretz Yisrael, since they were experiencing such great and unbelievable spiritual elevation? They were spiritually more elevated than anyone could ever be because of all of these miraculous things that they were immersed and embedded and encompassed by. So again, this is a very interesting way how the Rebbe presents the question. Over 2 pages the Rebbe takes to present this question about all the different details about how any type of negation of godliness should have been completely out of the question. And so the question is, both on the Meraglim, who were very choshev people, and on the general generation that they had all of this influence of the Mon and the so on and the Anania Kovid, how could they even think of going against the Eibishter in such a fashion? Any questions before we go on? Okay, bottom of the second, top of the 3rd page of the mind, page 628. Achayin, who come before about the Rushim, the idea behind this is, like it's explained in the Mamorim, the Hianisanis. This is actually the very reason why, because they were immersed in such holiness and godliness, that's why they resisted going into Eretz Yisrael. The Mekibim show you Anshi Dora Midbar, B'Midbar Sinai, Anshi Moshe, since they were the men of the generation of Midbar, and they were in the wilderness of Sinai. and they were Moshe's disciples. Like we're soon going to explain the significance of that. They ate bread from heaven. They drank water from the well of the spring of Miriam. The clouds of glory protected them. That's why they didn't want to enter Israel. They did not want to leave this elevated place and uprights sich von den Yonim Nailim and to tear oneself away from these elevated matters, well, Lechus Leretz Canaan, and to go to the land of Canaan. He's going to explain how their mind worked over here. The idea behind this is the Maraglim, the Maraglim were Moshe Rabbeinu's disciples and students. Jehu Bechinas Chachma the Kedusha. Chassidus brings down that Moshe is min amayim shisihu. I drew him from the water. The level of water is the level of Chachma. Moshe Rabbeinu was Chachma the Kedusha. That's why he said Lamar Yosef Lamazeh and so on. Chassidus explained because he was the level of Chachma. He needs to understand according to Chachma, and not just Chachma the way Chachma could be aloof and transcend everything, but also ba'ofen shachachma and sheches lament as shari bina, such a way the way Chachma is drawn down into the 49 levels of bina. That this Chachma is such that comes down in a way that's understood in Kedusha. Since they were on the level of Chachma Kedusha, so their complaint was based on their comprehension, understanding. How could one leave behind Har Sinai, Midbar Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai? Over there, the Torah was given. And over there, there's bread from heaven. To go to Eretz Yisrael, and to eat over there bread from the earth. Magam, and in addition to this, it's not just that they would leave such a holy place and go to such a low place, but it would make them lower. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, it says, when you will come to the land, the land will rest and have a Shabbos for Hashem. We'll have the Shemitah. 6 years you shall plant your field. 6 years you will cut your vines. So the famous question is, why does he start off with Shemitah at the beginning of the pasuk and then goes to the work? It's the other way around. First, they would work the land 6 years, then they would have Shemitah. So the reason why right away it says, Ki savoy ol when you will come to the land, then you will observe Shemitah, means that my attitude immediately has to be about Shemitah. Already at the beginning has to be made a decision and resolution that I'm going to keep the 7th year, that I'm going to keep a Shabbos for Hashem, Shemitah. The idea of keeping Shemitah is self-sacrifice. You imagine if you told a person, a dentist, a stockbroker, a real estate broker, an electrician, you know what? Every 7th year, you're staying home. You're not doing electrical work. You're not going to the stock market. You're not going to sell any real estate. You say, what are you, crazy? Are you out of your mind? How am I going to make a living? The living that the Yidden made in Eretz Yisrael was agriculture. You tell them, you're staying home, no work in the field. And not only that, but anything that grows over there, everybody else can take. What's going on over here? How that's the ultimate type of level of self-sacrifice. As all the Chazal say, that those that observe Shemitah are fulfilling his words, to listen to his words. Because they place their trust in Hashem, even though it's completely illogical to say that a person that's employed, all of a sudden, I'm going to give up my employment for a year. What's my family going to eat? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? This decision with which they have to go into Eretz Yisrael, is already a challenge. It's a test. How can I do this? That's why it's mysterious nefesh. And whenever you're dealing with tests, the very fact that you need to engage with a challenge and a test, that means that there's a descent. That is one descent that would occur when the generation of the Midbar would go into Eretz Yisrael. Another descent is, in addition to this, the Gamze in the Maspik. Also, this is insufficient. There has to be the literal work of the earth. You literally need to engage with physical things to sow the field and to prune the vine. Not in such a way that it says when Mashiach comes that foreigners will stand up and they will take your sheep out to graze. You, Tizra is going on you, that you will have to do all of it. The Yidden themselves had to be involved in working the field. And working the field is a great test. The Inyan Avoidus Hadama, what's the idea of this working of the field? Haino Avoidus Aberurim, it's doing the work of refining the sparks. With Varim Shanaful, Klibas Noigal matters that fell into Klibas Noigal and lower than that. It's now in the Soyin God, that's a great test to deal with worldly things. The Rashbi also has a problem with working the fields. Is it possible a person will plow and a person will sow? What's going to be with the Torah? So we see how challenging it is to deal with the world. That was the content of the complaint of the people who were such a knowledgeable generation. According to understanding of Kedusha, there's room for the complaint. That they do not want to immerse themselves and place themselves in the place of a test. It's illogical. It makes no sense according to Kedusha. Not feel like the expression of davening. Every morning we say this. Do not bring us to a test and a challenge. And the Rebbe says, even on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, we're still asking Hashem, don't bring us to a test. So we see that this is such a powerful request that we have. And here, we were taking and immersing the whole Klal Yisrael into a state where it's nisyonis. And Maraglim would not want to insert themselves into a place of doubt. That perhaps they will and perhaps they won't. The Rebbe again a lot of times uses the expression "Kol hadrachim b'cheskas sakon." All ways are are to be assumed to be dangerous. In other words, the Rebbe was applying it to this world. Engaging with the world is a dangerous occupation. We're always putting in danger our godly soul. The Rebbe says, what's the danger? Eventually, everybody is going to do tshuva. Eventually, no one is going to be completely pushed away. So fine, I mess up. I'll eventually, with Mashiach, everything will be cleared. So what's the doubt over here? What are you so worried about? The Rebbe says, it's brought down the expression that there's a doubt that is this going to be, this lo yidach men nidach is going to happen in this Gilgul, or I'm going to have to wait for another Gilgul for that. So why risk it? It's considered a doubt that I'll never fix this up now. And then the Rebbe says a very interesting idea about the Nephilim. Why they bring in over there about the Nephilim, the giants that were Nephilim because they were nafal min hashamayim, they fell from heavens, because that emphasized this even more so about the dangers of engaging with the world. That's also why the Meraglim related that they saw the Nephilim. That these are the Malachim that fell from above. It doesn't just mean that they came down in a Shamayim and they came down to this physical earth, but actually they fell lower in their place. How through a descent to a low place, it became an idea of falling. So therefore, they were saying and showing, give a look what happened with these malachim. But it's how much more so. The malachim if the malachim did not descend from such a high place. They weren't located in the place where the Torah was received. And the Kol Mochen Paul Zebem feel still in all it affected the Malach that they fell. How much more so that they will leave the place that they received Torah from it. In other words, the Meraglim would be taken out of the place, and the generation would be taken out of the place where they received the Torah in Midbar Sinai. Surely it would cause falling. How much more so from these Malachim? Therefore, the complaint of the Meraglim was, how is it appropriate to leave Midbar Sinai and to come and to enter into such a great test, to be answered and to be concluded next week.